So I'm going to answer common questions I get. First question, am I going to do any maths on Nilou? No, actually I don't think you can find any good maths on Nilou teams now or in the near future. To put it simply, blooms are most of this team's damage, and as you know, blooms come down to how much dendro and hydro your team can apply. The thing is, any expectation is going to be different to reality, like depending on the amount of enemies, where exactly these enemies are positioned, as well as the exact second and order you press your team skills. It can all change a lot. This is why I also think it means focusing too much on rotations is a bit pointless too. Next question, do you need to build EM on the whole team? If so, how much do you need? I can say from my experience and from checking out other players' speedruns, for Nilou, EM is nice but not the most important thing. Obviously, HP is her main thing. For Kokomi, EM is the most important stat for her. And then for Traveler and Collei, ER and EM are important. Now, having said that, this does present an issue for some players, which is you need to farm or already have farmed lots of EM artifacts. Obviously, you might know that EM is actually the rarest main stat for artifacts in the game, so do try not to get too unlucky. On the plus side, we'll get you most of the pieces in this team, so there's pros and cons. Also, make sure the whole team is level 90. Bloom reactions scale high with levels, so that's very important. Last question about the team as a whole is, which hydro do you use on field? Now, if you've seen my Abyss runs, you'll know you can actually play either Kokomi or Nilou depending on the situation. And actually, I didn't even really change my builds. I can summarize it like Kokomi on field with Nilou off field. Kokomi's attacks in her burst mode heals the team so much. And as well as that, the more reactions Kokomi triggers, the more damage the team can do because of her EM stats. However, I do have footage of using Nilou on field, using her sword dance. You might have noticed the reason why this is good is because the setup is very fast, and actually her sword dance has more AoE than Kokomi's normal attacks, which I find very useful for quick fights. And like I said, it's not like I changed Nilou's build to do this. This was just a situational adaptation. So getting into specific characters, here's Nilou. This is my build. First question for her, how important is Nilou's weapon and does she suck without it? This is easy to answer. Obviously without it you won't be doing as much damage as I am, but I can tell you now, people are still speedrunning with Iron Sting. I've seen people get 50-second clears with Iron Sting, and that's still faster than many other teams with their signature weapons. It's not the end of the world if you don't have the key. Next question, are HP stats more important than everything, even if you have to sacrifice ER? This is actually a tricky one. You do want the Tenacity 2-piece set bonus for 20% HP for sure, and for her artifact stats you do want to stack as much HP as you can. If you have a signature weapon like me, you'll end up somewhere over 70k, but the question is, do you prioritize HP substats over everything, or is it worth losing a bit of HP if it means you can have high energy recharge as well as some EM substats? So originally, with my first 2 speedruns, I did put HP above everything else. I was using this flower and this feather, but actually what I realized is, watching some other people's gameplay, is Nilou's burst is better than you think. And then my fastest speedrun, I used this flower instead. Slightly less HP but a lot of ER. Now I have heard people say her burst is like a DPS loss, or it doesn't really do much, but actually it applies hydro in a wide AoE. This means more consistent bloom damage, and also it can help finish off enemies who might have been slightly out of your range otherwise. And another good point, because not everyone cares about speedrunning, is its iframes. It's quite simple, you stop taking damage for a while, which is useful for all players. Last question on Nilou's build, how important do I think her talents are? They really aren't that important. These don't affect the team's bloom damage, which is like most of your team's damage. And actually in my runs it's barely even leveled, and I've seen other people's runs where it's barely even leveled. However, I think eventually it's worth leveling up, like at least her skill and burst to level 8. because once you got your artifacts all sorted and you're level 90, it's just 3 damage. Besides, I do think it's a lot more reasonable with characters like this who only use 2 talents rather than characters who need investing in all 3. So this is my Kokomi's build. One of the most popular questions is, do you really need to stack as much EM as possible, and how easy is it to die? Which I would say, yes, it's highly recommended to max your EM out as much as possible, and ideally, like me, you'd have the Gilded Dream set. But obviously I know many people are concerned about HP, which is why you should also try to get HP substats. But things might get a little tricky because you do want some ER as well. Here's the thing though, she will still heal almost 4k off field, and if that's not enough, when she's in her burst mode, her healing is more than good enough as always. The other question is pretty similar. It's people asking, what about ocean hued clam, or even still building for EM but using a healing bonus circlet? Personally, I don't think it's worth it. She does so much reactions in this team, and it's not like putting a healing bonus circlet will double your healing. Because she's such an important damage dealer, I don't think it's worth losing out on too much EM here. Remember, I'd also like to add, as well as EM, Sacrificial Fragments allows Kokomi to reposition her jelly. This is massive in this team especially. Because you don't have characters like Kazuha or Venti, being able to control your AoE like this with Sacrificial Fragments is extremely useful. Onto the Dendro supports builds, I stack both ER and EM on them. The next question is investing in these 2 characters really worth it? You don't have to level up their talents if you're stingy, but as I mentioned earlier, level 90 is huge for this team, and I think stacking EM on them is huge too. And also, I've explained this in the comment section before, but once you play this team, it's really noticeable that the team's damage spikes when Collei uses her skill and burst. She's very strong in this team. I don't know why people are so negative. Maybe they haven't played this team enough to realize this. Look at this footage of my speedrun where I'm hitting the final enemy in the back with her boomerang. And actually, this is what allows me to do this chamber so quickly. The next question is, which character gets the Deepwood set? If you didn't know, the Deepwood set is kind of like VV for this team, so it's mandatory, but you should be putting Deepwood on the Traveller. It's pretty self-explanatory with his burst duration. It's also very natural to start your setups with him, so the enemies are debuffed early. The next question is, do I recommend sack frags on both, or can you use Fav Sword on the Traveller? I've tried out different variations in different speedruns. You could do either. Honestly, I don't think it makes too much of a difference. But as for Collei, I think sack bow on her is pretty strong. The extra utility and the extra Dendro application I think is very noticeable. But obviously if you have Elegy of the End, you could use that too, but I don't. Another common question on Collei is, do they go Gilded Dreams or do you go Instructors? That's actually a good question, because Instructors is a lot of EM for the team, to be fair. But from my experience, a build with proper 5-star artifacts just clears faster, and I've seen that in other people's speedruns too. I think you also have to consider how her HP would be very low with Instructors. You can see some of my footage with sack bow, you do take quite a bit of damage because of the field time on her. And lastly, the final question, which I do see a lot, is people asking, because this abyss is biased towards Nilou, will she be good after? To be honest, with these kind of questions, I don't really care. Like, I don't think I've seen so many people complain or be so salty that a character is doing well in the abyss before. I don't think I've seen anything like this. Maybe she might struggle in future abysses, maybe not. We can't really say until these things come out and we test it. Besides, I would like to add, in this current abyss, whilst the second and third chambers are easy, she isn't actually that advantaged for the first chamber. Like, it's much easier playing teams with Kazuha or Venti grouping. I'm sure most of you would agree. And speaking of that, personally, I like that with Nilou, you have to put a bit of effort and go back to traditional ways of crowd control and AoE manipulation. Thanks for watching this video. Hopefully I did cover everyone's questions. If there was something I missed, then just let me know in the comments and I'll try answer it.